It's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Stephen Nakada, who comes from us from the University of Wisconsin. He's the chairman of the Department of Urology. Last night, you gave the residents a great dinner, and they really super appreciated what you had to say. Welcome to the University of Michigan and our Nesbit Society.
Well, thank you, Mady, and again, thanks to the Nesbit Society and Dr. Palpatu for this distinct honor. It's great to be amongst present, past and future leaders, and with due respect to the non-residents in the room, the best part of being a visiting professor is the time that you get to spend, with the residents. And as any great chairman would do, the first thing Ganesh asked me this morning is there anything I need to know, Steve? And I said, yes, there is. You have a top program here, so congratulations. Let's move on with the topic of the morning, which is leadership in organized urology. Is it for you? So in the next 25 minutes, I'll try to give you a bit of an overview and some things to think about and things for us to talk about, for the rest of the meeting. A couple of opening slides. A lot of people say, Steve, you don't need this credibility slide, but in this room I do. I've been a leader in a number of societies, and if you take anything away from today, when you serve on a committee or you serve a society, the best tip I can give you is you just try to make that group or that entity better than it was before you arrived. And that's pretty much what I've tried to do. Of note, when I was president of the Society of Academic Urologists, there was actually two organizations. And the one thing that was clear to me and Brant Thrasher is that they needed to be one organization. And that alone, I think, was worth serving me a few chicken dinners. So anyway. So the other opening comment is, I think leadership is really about setting the vision, and this is a Kennedy quote that, we'll go to the moon in 10 years, and we did, but in 8. And I think what's important is that there's a difference between merely having a goal and then becoming committed to a daunting challenge, like a mountain to climb. And I think that's one of the first truths that all leaders face, that you have to set the standard. So let's consider 3 areas that I'd like to talk about. One is, why do you want to be a leader? 2, do you have what it takes to be a leader? And then 3, what are some pearls that I can share with you today? So let's start right away with, why do you want to be a leader? Do you value organizational success? Do you revel in challenges? Do you appreciate group dynamics? Do you value relationships? Do you desire to move the field forward? Or do you seek personal gain, desire fame, want to win awards, you want respect and want to be thanked? So, obviously the left side of that screen has more power than the right. And I put that little best product sign. So these are the best slides, I think, to take home with you. And I'll talk about wanting respect. So I'll tell a brief story. You've heard some stories today. Muhammad Ali fought Ernie Terrell in 1967. And at that time, Ali had tried to change his name from Cassius Clay, many believed to avoid service in the Vietnam War. And when they started the weigh-in, Ernie Terrell's introduced to Muhammad Ali, and he says, you're Cassius Clay. You'll always be Cassius Clay to me. And then you can watch the fight on YouTube, and as Ali is pummeling Terrell with jabs, he's screaming, what's my name? What's my name? And by the 12th round, Terrell is bloodied and falling to the canvas. And Ali says one more time, what's my name? And he says, Muhammad Ali, and he drops him to the canvas and the fight is over. So respect is something that you can't beg or buy, you have to earn it. And I think whenever anyone comes to me wanting more respect, my first question is, do you think you deserve it? And I think it is something that you earn. Another anecdote, Ernie Terrell, who's still alive, conceded that Ali was his name like in the 3rd round. So really this is more of a drama story than anything else, but still he lost the fight. So do you have what it takes to be a leader? And I think there's certain attributes that if you don't have now, you'll have to gain. You have to be efficient. You have to be credible, proven. You have to be organized. You have to communicate clearly and expertly. And I also think, and we talked last night a little bit about this, you need to be positive. You need to be the optimist. But do you struggle to get things done? Are you still learning how to do your job? Are you not organized? Is communication a challenge? Do you tend to focus on the negative? All those things will make it difficult, I think, for you to succeed in leadership. So I think if there are areas to consider, these are critical. So what traits are important? I think social awareness is vastly underrated. I also think you have to be patient. I think on the one hand, you set the vision and the standard, but you have to understand what's realistic. I also think consistency is a key. I often relate, one of my colleagues that I used to do clinic with, he would be very angry and difficult to work with one day, and then he'd be the nicest person on earth the next and would buy everyone pizza. And I was pretty much the same. And I think consistency has great value. And I think predictability also is important. Again, I've already talked about optimism. And I think to some degree, having a charismatic, style has value. And I think all of those traits are important. Lincoln, who is very well quoted on leadership, says America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it's because we destroyed ourselves. And I think I preface this slide by showing you Lincoln, who is a senator from Illinois. So why is he at the University of Wisconsin in the center of the campus? And the short answer is Wisconsin is one of the land-grant institutions and has gained prowess from that and Lincoln's work. But more importantly, I think from a leadership standpoint, you have to have a good internal program before you can make it external and regional and even national. And certainly we've learned that, and I think you know that. And I think hearing a little bit about Jim Monte's years, congratulations, Jim, by the way, on all of that. But he understood that principle very well. So again, what are the skills that are important? And I think, logistics, communication, and delegation, these are difficult. And I think it starts with communication and ultimately moves to delegation. And again, Lincoln proves to be an excellent example of someone who did this well. The more senior people in the room recall the AAA. And that's what my faculty, my mentors taught me. All you have to do is be affable, able, and available, and you're going to be a great urologist. And, many of you have heard that, and I think there's some truth to it, but, today it is much more complex. I think being affable, is not necessarily just being a good buddy. You have to really understand socially how to get along with different people and to listen well. Able it's not just urology anymore. I think you have to have skills. You have to be able to work. We all work on teams, whether we even know it or not at times. And it requires a lot of depth skill to have good personal interactions with the people you're with and with your patients. The good news is you probably don't have to be available 24/7. I do think we've also moved subtly to more of a shift-based mentality, and as Dr. Hollander alluded to, duty hours, all of these things I think have made it, more reasonable. But overall, I think, it's a daunting challenge to get it all right, and the 3 A's are not what they used to be. Speaking of teams, I think a big part of leadership is being part of a team and then leading a team and then setting the standard. So this is Google on best teams. I think it's terrific, and it's what I try to do with all my teams. Every member is talking. There's less of a personal agenda, so we can have a free-flowing discussion. Seek social sensitivity. The group should be able to sense one another's frustrations or feelings, and this is hard, and particularly in the virtual environment, but I think it's a prerequisite to success. One of the hardest is there has to be some element of safety so that you can speak without fear of recrimination. It's on the resident survey, and it's just verbiage in some ways, but in real truth, it's critical. And then ultimately, the culture of dependability. I mean, I think if you're on the team, you need to deliver. It's not a concern. And if we can offer to the team the top three, then you have to deliver, the bottom gray box. So that's an important take home in my view on best teams. A little bit from Mel Gibson, The Patriot. This is just a comment on communication. Aim small, miss small. Aim at the top button of the uniform. But from where we work, I would say precision and clarity is critical to communication. So an example of a professor would say, get as many patients as possible in the study as quickly as possible. The deadline's in May. That's not really helpful. A better way to approach it is marketing needs to be done by a month. Educational strategies for the patients, should be available, and we need periodic assessment of progress and strategy. So, I think the leader can create a message that is understandable and manageable, and that's the job of the leader. And I think, if you struggle to do that, you need to figure it out if that's a part of your career that you want. So let's spend the rest of the time, sort of looking at some of the pearls here. And I think ultimately, anyone could have given, the front end of this talk or the last 12 minutes of it. How many are familiar with Kaizen and the master orientation versus ego orientation? Right, show of hands. I'm sure many of you have. I like to golf, so I'm going to give you the simplest golfer's analogy to Kaizen and mastery versus ego. So the Kaizen mastery approach, let's say to golf, would be, I'm going to practice driving, chipping, putting until I master them, and then I'm going to go and add up the strokes at the end of the day, and hope for improvement. The ego orientation says, I'm standing on this tee and I'm about to hit this drive, and what's everyone going to think, if I, hook it into the trees or I whiff on the tee. And I think this ultimately, is at the core of how you succeed. You have to look at your own skill set and build it. And that's much more important than what someone thinks about how you're doing things or how you sort of view yourself in the world. And those are kind of big words, but at the end of the day, I believe that the road to success is built on acquiring skills that you need and mastering those. And that fits right in with this mastery approach. And ego, is something that you can hopefully leave at the door. And I think the higher you go in leadership, obviously there are people with greater leadership acumen than I in the room, understand that the ego has to go. So this is an important message for you. So, congratulations on the Lions, if you're a Lion fan, victory last night. 1 point, 21-20. Actually, 40% of Super Bowl teams who lose in the first week don't make the playoffs. So if you're Kansas City fans, I don't know what that means, but too bad, I guess. But anyway, this is Bill Belichick, who's the coach of the Patriots. And he's an example. I actually like football, but I don't watch it that much. But I always watch the press conferences of the great coaches, and he's a genius. And after a bad loss on Monday Night Football, all Bill Belichick said at the press conference is, we're on to Cincinnati. They're playing Cincinnati next week. And they said, what do you think about this? We're on to Cincinnati. And I think the point is he is a process-oriented coach. If we block and tackle and carry out the game plan and lose the game, that's okay. But if we don't block and tackle and we win the game, that's not okay. So I think, again, he's an example of a highly successful coach who really focuses more on process than results. That being said, I think Churchill also said it right. However great your strategy is, you occasionally have to look at the results. And I think, as we all know, that's part of what you do. And fundamentally at medical meetings, it's outcomes, right? It's not necessarily process. But I think to get to the right outcomes, you have to master the process. And I think for most of us, this is a manageable phenomenon. And I think, again, it gets down to the standards and the skill sets that are required for whatever it is you're doing, and then the people around you are doing. And this really has helped me in the sense of I can identify faculty who have certain strengths and certain weaknesses, and certainly, my goal is to help them gain the skill sets they need to succeed, and those skill sets are variable. And they're not necessarily even skill sets that I always have. So a good thought for all of you. So what's a good thing to think about? The leader, and this is again, a best product slide. The leader has to do three things, I think. Process, logistics, that's what we do. And if you're not really good at logistics, tough to be a leader. And then the big one is crisis management. When there's a crisis, that's when there's nothing clearer in my mind than the COVID pandemic. And the first thing during the pandemic, what are we going to do? That's when Dr. Palpatu, myself, Dr. Wessels, all the leaders of urology, took it upon ourselves to figure this out. And I think that's when you know who the leader is. And then in light of mastering logistics and understanding crisis management, which in and of itself is a lecture, then the leader has to have common sense at the end of the day. And I think that's also hard. And the more you know, and many in the room understand this, the more you know, and the more you understand about how things are working in a complex environment like urology, it's easy to get lost in sort of basic common sense. And I think to get to the top, the third item is undervalued, even though many times I give this lecture and it's not well understood. So let's talk about this issue of logistics. And, Tiger Woods says, everyone is playing checkers and I'm playing chess, and I think as an example, in ureteroscopy, the questions you might ask are rigid or flexible, which laser, dust or basket, stent or not, and I think the real expert, has 13 questions, right? And when I assess a resident and I talk to faculty about a resident, the common questions: are they safe? Are they appropriate for their year? Do they arrive on time? Do they do their dictations? These are simple questions, but really there's much more, I think, that a top leader is interested in. These are just some of the items. So the depth of logistics, becomes, I think, separates, the leader from the others. So this was supposed to come in one at a time, but I'll describe the slide. I think it's good to understand your organization or your team. And I think when you look at this slide, I want you to understand that ability and talent is evenly distributed on this slide. So you basically have three groups, and forgive me for the sort of, the box-like approach. You have the proactives, who are the willfully engaged. They get it, they care, they're your top people. Then there are the inactives, so they're terrific, and they come to work, they're working 8 to 5, they do their job, and that's it, but terrific. And then you have the reactives, who are sort of the soft saboteurs, hallway gossips, the 20% of people that take up 80% of your time. And in general, most organizations, from a business standpoint, subdivide at 5 to 15% proactive, 5 to 15% reactive, and 70 to 90 in the inactive grouping. And what I would say when you begin to look at a bigger organization is the leader's job is to take some inactives who have great promise and try to make them into proactives. So you want to move inactives to the upper proactive zone, so you can get to 20%, 25%. And then with the reactives, you just want them inactive, just stop, and just, come to work and go home. That's okay. And I think what happens at the end of the day is the proactives that are top-notch move on and run their own organizations, and this institution, is a good example or a great example of that. And ultimately with the reactives, they either become inactive or they move on. So I think while this is a bit, of just a siloed slide, it is a way to think of it. And I do think of it in the sense that I'm trying to identify people that I can move forward. And when you talk about, again, the logistics of skill sets, I'm trying to take some folks that are inactives and give them the skills to move them, into leadership roles. And probably that's something that I've focused on in my career. And those of you who go into leadership should always be looking toward that positive. And I have another slide on this just to help out. It'll come in a minute. So let's consider being chairman. Why not? That's part of leadership. And my boss, made it pretty simple. He said, well, Steve, you got to balance the budget. You got to recruit and retain faculty. And then you need a vision and a blueprint appropriate for the resources and potential of your group. So this is sort of classic dean speak. I know there's a couple of deans or former deans in the room. So, this is what I see or I've heard. And I do think it's true. And to break it down, if you're running urology, you should be able to balance the budget. We get paid for services. Again, recruitment and retention of faculty. Frankly, that's what we do. And that's very, very important. And the vision blueprint is great. But the key 5 words there is appropriate for resources and potential. So, define that, and it's a challenge. So what I would tell, Dr. Palpatu and other chairs in the room is to some degree your job as a great chair is to position your department and your faculty to be integral in leading the health system. And obviously you've done that here, with some of your faculty who are, at the top of the org chart. But I think this is undervalued as well. We are fortunate to get to interact with our colleagues as chairs quite a bit, and I'm impressed at how few people, sort of look at line 4 or even understand line 4. And it's always battling the dean or battling the system. But really what you have to do is, I think, help the system and subsequently show tremendous value. And that makes your resources and potential much more significant. So this is an important thought process as you become chair of a department. And I think it's worthy of time, thought, and discussion. Part of it is creating a great culture, and it's always a challenge. And we became a department in 2008. We were a division for 7 years. Somebody said you have to be a department. I think Caleb Nelson quoted Jim Monty, and yeah, 100%, 110%. That's true. I think less than 5% of urology programs in the United States are divisions today, but there are a couple of notable programs that are. But when we became a department, I sort of started with this rules of achievement. And this is a communication tool, and in 2008, I said, we build a strong foundation, we define success, we create an environment of trust, tell the truth, be accountable, live with honor, basically kind of Jim Monty Volume 2. But then later, more recently, I tried to centralize the thoughts a little bit more. But my point is, I think there is a benefit in communicating from the leadership standpoint what you're about, so that people kind of understand it. And I didn't really know if it had any interest. And I gave these cards out, in 2008 we became a department, and obviously logistically failed because I didn't make any more of them. So when it was time to redo it, I said, shoot, what did I have on that card? And then one of my faculty pulled it right out of his wallet, and he said, I got it right here. So anyway, that's one of a few. But either way, I think it's a useful tool. A little bit about mentorship. This is something we all do as leaders. And this is just an important caveat for all of you. I think when you start mentoring folks, for me, almost 90% of the time, you're focusing people. you're not adding, you're focusing. And I think that the best leaders know their people well enough to sort of direct them in an area that they can succeed. So it's rare that I have to add, enthusiasm. It's more, we're creating the arrow from the rock. And I'd be interested in what other leaders think, but certainly that's been my experience. And I think the key is to be able to deliver that message. What are some pitfalls to be avoided? So this is kind of the negative part of it. Unpreparedness, self-centeredness, and uninformed trust. I'll quickly relate to you that this is James Hickey in the car behind the Kennedy motorcade in Dallas in 1961. And, there's a book that was published in 2011 that really identified Kennedy did not necessarily die from a bullet from either Lee Harvey Oswald or the mafia or Cuba or whatever. It really was the Secret Service. And part of it is the Secret Service was out till 5 in the morning. And so one person, Lieutenant or Mr. Hickey, cleaned the cars, didn't go out. And then as a reward to him, they let him sit in the motorcade right behind JFK. And they used the AR-16 assault rifle, which you have to pre-cock before you fire. What Hickey didn't know is that in the presidential motorcade, all the rifles are pre-cocked. So when he heard the gunshot, he pulled up his AR-16 to pre-cock it, and it fired. And that probably was the shot. So what's the point of that? Uninformed trust. Maybe we have to do better with the Secret Service. Sort of a little quick comment on how you manage proactive, reactive, and inactive people. What I do is if you're proactive, if you call me, I'll pick up the phone. That's simple. If you're an inactive person, I'll check and say, is this urgent? And if it isn't, then I'll say, let's talk about it later. And if you're reactive, I say something like, I'm very interested in what you have to say, but let's just discuss it at another time. Please set it up. So when I showed this to the faculty, they were all thinking, wow, at what point is he going to just answer the phone? So anyway. So negative feedback is important. I think we were talking about this last night. And I think it's critical. And you have to be able to deliver it well. So these are my sort of favorite 3. Tudor, who used to work with us, and Craig, who works with us now, hasn't heard this. You're good, not great. That's one thing I'll say. I appreciate your efforts here, but they just need to be better, and I would elaborate. And then in the serious case, I'd say you are too important to this organization to make mistakes like this. So I do think you have to help people, sometimes you have to give negative feedback. Can we run this video real quick? I'm running over, so I apologize. Can we run this? Oh, do I do it?
I don't care about what's going on with those kids. If I had my way, Governor Barker would be on his way to The Hague. But this is about process and what's best for our democracy.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay. Look, you might be in my shoes one day soon. And the point is, the job isn't about doing what's right. It's about doing what's best. And that is right.
Yeah, controversial to say the least, but what I will say here is, what is right is on the left, what is best is on the right. And I think, again, patience is part of this. I think we know where we want to get to. And my take-home message here is manageable differences and consensus, I think still rule, even though it's difficult to get to right all the time. T.S. Grover, anybody read T.S. Grover? It's a book, and he talks about the cooler, the closer, and the cleaner. And, effectively, what I'm wanting to say to you here is, ideally the cleaner does a good job because that's their job. They make things happen. They do the work, and they know that you'll be grateful for the privilege of paying them. So that's sort of the cleaner is the highest level. And when I show this and talk about the 3 levels, in any given moment, for any given skill set, you can be the cooler, the closer, the cleaner. And I think what you want to do is to sort of understand that, and depending on the department task, depending on your task, you have to find your place. And that's, I think, is higher level thinking, but I think it's an opportunity when you're on committees and you're part of the AUA and other things, you have to figure out, what your role is at any given moment. This is the World Trade Center. This is the slurry wall. And basically, this wall was supposed to collapse. My late mother was going in the subway at 9/11 to get her hair done, and she was evacuated from the subway in Queens. So when I called the house to make sure she was okay, saying, why are they evacuating the subway? And that's because this wall was supposed to fall apart, and the entire subway system was going to be flooded. And it didn't happen. And the reason is the wall was better than it was supposed to be. And my tip to you is, whenever you have an opportunity, sometimes it's good to be better than expected. I'll skip that. So my only data slide of the day, and it's colonoscopy versus lithotripsy. It's a study from 2003. Patients had colonoscopy and lithotripsy, and when they had pain, they pressed a button, and they could press hard enough to get pain intensity. So which procedure was worse, the colonoscopy or the shock wave? Those are the pain scores. What's your guess? Pick one. Somebody. Okay, shockwave was better, and the reason is because the ending was better. So I've got to give you a good ending. So here it is. This tree is the survivor tree. It survived. This is outside the World Trade Center, again, my New York roots. And it survived the Hurricane Sandy. It survived the first World Trade Center bombing. It survived the second World Trade Center bombing. And today it's protected by a gate and is held up, with chains. And I think when it comes to leadership and academic urology, it's a reasonable approach to be the survivor tree and to continue to add value. You saw some of that at this meeting, and it's my final thought for all of you. So really been a great honor and pleasure to be with all of you. I realize these are multiple thoughts that my goal is to get you to think about and consider. I'm glad I'll be around. We can talk more. But thank you so much for this distinct opportunity.
And Dr. Nakada, on behalf of the Nesbit Society and the Department of Urology, we'd like to give you the certificate for being our visiting speaker today.
Okay. Oh,
Thank you.
you.